Hey there friends, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I am of course Paul Glasgow here, the Truth Pimp, the one and only Truth Pimp, dealing you a full and complete dose of a vulgar display of logic and reason. Hope you guys will bear with me for a second day in a row, because this is going to wind up being my What About the Kids series. What about the kids? Why are we trying to, and I don't know another word to use besides expose our children to things they don't need to be exposed to when they're little bitty kids? When I'm talking about kids, I'm not like the gun control wackos out there that consider a 21-year-old man a kid. I'm talking about 4 and 5-year-old kids, sometimes as young as 3 and 4. Why do we allow other adults who clearly are twisted in the mind to deliver things to our children, and in some cases try to hide the fact that they're even doing it? What am I talking about? You guys surely have heard about this SCOTUS case, the Supreme Court case, where this Maryland school district is trying to roll out a bunch of these books in a curriculum, embedded in a curriculum in little bitty kids' school. We're talking about like alphabet type books as young as pre-K, 4 or 5-year-old kids. And then, of course, 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders, and all that. They're trying to embed these books of alternativeness in with the other curriculum. Now, we're talking about a school district that already has opt-out options based on religious reasons or other particular reasons. In other words, if your child, for instance, in, let's say, 5th grade, if you don't want your child to take the sex education class, you can opt out of that class. But it's a whole class. And I don't want to get that confused with what I'm talking about today, because they have gotten slick how they are weaving the inappropriate stuff for children into normal curriculum so that you can't opt out. Let me explain more about what's going on here in a second. I want you to watch this video clip first, and then you get a better feel for the whole story of what's happening, and we'll talk more about it.
The court's ruling will likely set a national precedent and guidelines for what's being taught in America's classrooms and what role parents get to have in these decisions. Now, this is different from sex ed, which typically parents can opt out of. What's happening here is they're weaving these themes into teaching materials for other subjects, just like they would any other stories. While the court dealt with this latest dispute involving religion inside, protesters gathered outside to defend the books in question, while others demanded parental rights.
It's all members of the LGBTQ community.
I am fighting for all of our religious parents.
The controversy began in 2022 after the Montgomery County Board of Education approved a list of LGBTQ storybooks for elementary classrooms.
To protect our children from what? From being forced to learn things that might contradict with their religious teachings at home.
Parents opposing the district's decision argue their constitutional rights were violated when the school system removed their ability to opt their kids out of LGBTQ-themed lessons.
Petitioners deserve complete preliminary relief in a system where thousands of students are daily opted in and out of the class for multiple reasons.
Among the books approved as part of the language arts curriculum, My Rainbow, about a black transgender girl, and Uncle Bobby's Wedding, a story about a gay uncle getting married.
It's a message that a lot of people who hold on to traditional religious beliefs don't agree with.
An attorney representing Montgomery County Schools argued that deciding in favor of the parents would create chaos for public education.
And a constitutional requirement to provide opt-outs from anything someone finds religiously offensive would mean public schools must find alternative classrooms, supervision for young students, and substitute lessons each time a potentially offensive topic arises.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor pressed attorneys for specifics on the nature of the parents' objections.
Is looking at 2 men getting married. Is that the religious objection?
Again, it would depend on the individual beliefs of the clients.
Montgomery County argues that the stories touch on the same themes as classic fairy tales and say opt-outs are unmanageable and disruptive. The lower courts agreed. Now the justices must weigh how much exposure to certain ideas amounts to coercion or simply part of a public education.
What are the ages of the children who are involved here?
These books were approved for pre-K, which in Montgomery County can start as early as 3.
Justices pressed both sides on where to draw the line between religious liberty.
Does that suggest a hostility toward religion?
And inclusive education.
And I'm just curious if you think lines can be drawn and where they would be drawn.
A decision is expected by the end of June, and with it the potential to reset the national conversation around classroom content and parental rights in the public school setting.
First of all, they already have opt-out options here. And they're saying that, if they created another reason why a child or a parent could opt their child out of a particular class, that would create other hardships. Well, wait a minute, you're already doing it. So I guess their argument is that, we can have opt-outs, but we can't afford to do any more. Because any more would be disruptive. Really. Why didn't you just include the gay books? And I'm going to use some flowery language today because I don't care. But throw the gay books into your little sex education class. Even though inappropriate, if a parent doesn't want their child to be exposed to your sex education stuff, then throw your gay stuff in and your trans stuff in with all of that. That way they get to miss it all whenever they opt out. That's one opt-out. They're taking care of two things in one opt-out. You're already letting them opt out of that now. So if you put that other thing in there, argument's taken care of, right? You know what they're doing? They want to indoctrinate your children because people are sick. People are twisted. People are mad. And a lot of times it's self-hate. Some of these gay people, and certainly the trans people, they hate their lives so much that they're mad that you don't have it as miserable as them. So they want more people like them in their little groups. So the only way they can figure that out in order to do that is to force that in front of people, and hopefully it catches on, right? So I've heard people say, and we're not going to get too deep in the weeds here, but I've heard gay people say, I was born like this. I didn't become like this. Well, wait a minute. If that's the case, then why would you want to rush a child, or why would you need a child to watch these videos and read these books so they could turn gay or trans or whatever? Because you just said you were born like that. Well, if you were born like that, and if they truly are gay or trans, then they were born like that too, right? You can't have it both ways. You're either born like that or you're not born like that. And I don't have an opinion either way. This is not my argument. This is their argument. I constantly hear people say, I was born like this. I didn't choose this. Well, great. Well, then that means that we don't need to force this on the children at young ages, because if they are like that, they will decide to be like that and follow through with whatever they were, quote, born as later on in life whenever it's more appropriate. Because right now at 4 years old, it ain't appropriate. But to sit here and say that because you can't afford more opt-outs is bullcrap. You know how they're doing this? They're weaving this into a different class, a different curriculum. In other words, even though all these second graders might be in the same class for the whole day, their report card has different things listed, right? It's not just one thing. It doesn't say class and then you have one grade, even though you stay in the same class all day long. They have English, they have math, they have social studies, they have science, they have PE. But you're with the same class and sometimes, most cases, the same teacher all day. She distributes those different grades for each one of the subjects within that class. So instead of them, which I still think is inappropriate, putting a topic like that into their sexual education classes that parents have the option to opt out of right now, they're wanting to put this not in a sex education class. They're wanting to put this in the English class so that you can't opt out of it. That's one of their arguments, is that, first of all, they don't want to opt out, want any more parents to opt out because it's troublesome. It disrupts the day, it disrupts the schedule. But they're also saying that if you opt out, that's like an incomplete grade. So the child is going to fail English because you forced some kind of inappropriate sexual stuff into the English curriculum. Well, again, I go back to what I said previously. Why not let them take English the normal way, like they always have, and grade them on English, and let them opt out of the sex education class if they don't want to by taking that weird little book, The Pride Puppy, and sticking it in with your sexual education stuff. Because if the ones want to stay there and read Pride Puppy, they can. The ones that want to opt out don't have to read it. Again, I'm solving your problems for you. This is too much common sense for me to actually be espousing all at once. It feels kind of silly because it's stuff you guys should have already thought of. Now again, here's the book Pride Puppy. I don't know if the dog is gay too, but it looks like everybody else in the picture is supposedly gay. Kind of hard to see a lot of this stuff. Some of this, I'm going to be real honest with you, when you look at some of this stuff, it's pretty harmless. This is an ABC's book, and you can't tell me that there's not an ABC book that doesn't create controversy. This seems a little silly that we have to create something where there is no problem already. The kids are stupid these days, not because you didn't have a Pride book for ABCs for them. They're stupid because the teachers suck. That's why. And quite frankly, the kids are over-medicated and a whole slew of other things with crappy parents involved too. But if you look at these pictures, to me, they're including in some of these instances drag queens in here. And quite frankly, when I look at this stuff, like this picture right here. Okay, if you look here, this is for letter W. Well, you can see a couple of what I presume to be, because they did say that there were drag queens in this book. These were the only two images of people that I could assume were drag queens. I'm talking about the two people on the stage, the blue-haired lady on the right and the rainbow-haired lady with the big pink dress. And I say lady because I guess these are men, drag queens on stage. Well, if I'm a child and I look at this, to me this is harmless. I don't automatically look at that and think it's a drag queen. I think one of them is a blue-haired woman. The other one is a fat lady in a dress. I don't see drag queens when I see this. So this to me isn't offensive. The offensive part is when you have to start answering questions when these kids ask, what is a drag queen? And look on the little wagon down there. Queer farmers, right? I'm not talking about the two gay dogs right there that are either both male and both female. I'm fixing to go to Pound Town. I'm talking about the little wagon where it says queer farmers. Whenever you do stuff like this, and this stuff does not look normal, feel, or appear normal to a young 4 or 5-year-old child, they're going to ask questions. Question number 1 when you flip to this page, what is a queer? What is a queer farmer? Do they raise gay fruit? Do they use gay fruit, if you know what I mean? Or do they just like each other? So you have to start answering questions. And when you talk about what a queer is, and now you can't get mad at me for using the word queer because you're actually including it in your own book. But whenever you make me have to answer to my child and tell them what a queer is, now they're going to ask, well, how is that different than you and mom? Now I have to answer to them and say, well, queers are two men who look like me, who like each other. And whenever they say that, well, you like Uncle so-and-so, or you like so-and-so, well, I don't like them like that. So now you have to start explaining what queer is and the different types of like. So instead of me hanging out with my buddies Chris and Bob and Gary, now I have to explain to them that these queers are not, quote, hanging out. They're banging each other. I don't want to have that conversation with my 4-year-old. I don't want to have it. It's not time. They don't need to know that right now. If they want to hear about pillow biting, they can find that out on their own. Go surf the internet when they get a little bit older. Have somebody else explain it to them. But I don't want to explain to my 4-year-old what a fudge packer is. Or a queer, a queer. One of the other books was Uncle Bobby's Wedding. Now, quite frankly, guys, I went through this one. It's a pretty harmless book. It really is. It talks about the little girl you see down at the bottom, and that's her uncle on the left. It just talks about how she goes to a wedding where two guys are getting married. That one seems harmless to me. But you guys know as well as I do, this is gateway stuff. As soon as we accept this, then we're right back to putting condoms on bananas again in 4th grade, right? So that's the problem with this. You give these nutbags an inch and they start reaching for all kind of other silly stuff because they're like, well, that didn't offend them. Let's move to the next level of inappropriateness. Here's another one of the books, Prince and the Knight. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a dude, man. I'm a guy. This kind of stuff cracks me up. I mean, you're seeing the little dude, the little prince, I guess, with all the girls fawning over him, and you see him looking up at I guess that's the knight, and going, "What up, dude?" It's just stupid. This is not necessary to a 4-year-old child. Again, all you're doing whenever you pull this kind of stuff out, you put this back on the parent. And it should be on the parent, because I don't want the teachers talking about this, but you put it back on the parent for the kid to start asking questions at home. What's a queer? Well, why is he queer? Who made him queer? What do queers do? How do queers have babies? You see what I'm saying? You get into a slew of other questions and topics that their mind is not ready for yet. You remember how in 10th grade, my first biology class, I took science in 9th grade, I took biology in 10th grade. I remember my 10th grade biology class when we got into sexual reproduction. We're talking about 15-year-old boys here, and girls too, but the boys mostly, they're immature ones, right? I remember all the snickering, all the laughing and all that. When you showed the outline of a penis in biology class, or you talked about how the penis would do this and, ejaculate or whatever, and all the snickers and all the laughing and all that kind of stuff. That's with people who are 10 years more mature than a 4-year-old child. Can you imagine the 4-year-old child trying to wrap their head around that kind of stuff? We didn't even talk about gay people in biology in 10th grade, thankfully. But now we're wanting to expose these little kids to stuff like that. This whole group, this whole court thing going, and this is a big deal with Supreme Court because it's going to set precedent. Every other state, every other county, every other parish should be paying attention to this. Because you got some kind of twisted nutbag somewhere in the shadows waiting for this case to be completed. And if it rules in favor of the Maryland School District where they can put all this filth in there with their children at 4 years old and pre-K, everybody's going to start following suit. It may not be tomorrow, but they will follow suit. But I want to explain something to you. We always get told that these wackos on the left are the tolerant people. And we always learn the lesson that they're not. They continuously prove to us how intolerant they are. This is the same thing. This is literally the same thing. What they're doing here, this county in Maryland, is they're trying to say that the Christian and Muslim, there's a lot of Muslims in here, somebody might get beheaded. But there's a lot of these people saying that these more conservative families, whether they're Christian, Muslim, and let's face it, atheist families too who don't believe in either, still may feel this is inappropriate to show to their child. Let's be really honest about that. But they're trying to say that these more conservative parents are closed-minded. They're not open-minded enough to new ideas. The problem is the parents raising their children. They're closed-minded and they're raising their children to be closed-minded as well. Let me make a quick point, and maybe I'm wrong about this, and you can let me know in the comment section down below. When they're trying to say that I'm intolerant because I don't want somebody talking about a drag queen to my 4-year-old, isn't it equally closed-minded for somebody who is really left-leaning and wacko like these people who want to show this inappropriate material to my child at 4 years old? Isn't it equally closed-minded that they don't accept my conservatism, my conservative views? In other words, if I don't approve of you biting pillows and slamming some dude from behind, if I don't approve of that, that makes me closed-minded. But you don't approve of the conservative lifestyle that I choose to lead on my own, and that's not closed-minded? It may not be as filthy one thing as the other, but it's certainly a difference in opinion. And just the fact that you are okay with some certain form of filth doesn't mean that you're any more, I guess, high and mighty and noble than I am because, you're thinking outside the box. My views are old and antiquated. Well, you know what? My views have been tried and true for a lot longer than yours have. And I remember, if you want to cite the Bible, there was a particular town that did not last very long because it wasn't of the type of views that most of us conservatives agree with. And I'm not going to go into the Bible right now, but you guys know what I'm talking about. But if we're going to sit here and argue about who's closed-minded and who's more open-minded? Who gets to decide that? At what point do we determine who decides that? Me, with my own child that I'm having to raise, or you, who sees my child for 7-8 hours a day? And therein lies the other problem, public school system. In many cases, and there's different reasons, some is the parents can't wait to get the kid off to school. Others, the parents have to work their butts off to provide for the child, so they have to do the same thing. But these schools are raising our children. And trust me, the schools want that. Don't listen to the teachers who are like, I don't want to have to raise your child. No. I'm not talking about at the teacher level. It's much higher up. That's why you're having all this pushback from the Department of Education. They want to raise your children. Why? This exact same reason. They want, and not only want, they need to be able to indoctrinate your children in order to continue along this twisted path that they're pushing for. Because they know that anyone that has any reasonable amount of common sense would not agree with most of the stuff that they espouse. So they need you to turn your kids over to them during the day and not pay attention to anything that's going on. If they weren't afraid that what they were talking about was wrong, then why do they try to hide it? Because that's part of the problem here. They're trying to set it up to where the parents don't know what types of school books these children are reading at school. They purposely want to hide that from the parents. They want to be able to teach these children from these twisted books with no knowledge to the parents whatsoever of what that curriculum entails and what it involves as far as the subject matter. Well, if you have to hide it, it's probably not appropriate. And that means the vast majority of people who are sending their children to school probably don't approve either. So you are the minority right now. And that's why they have to maintain this type of control. Because in order to grow those numbers, they need you to turn your child over to the public school system.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's so horrible.